very much of what goes on now in talk about school reform is very cognitively oriented, and says that if we have the curriculum that's focusing on the right set of skills, etc. It's like if we build it, the kids will come. And if we just have the right rigorous curriculum and high expectations of standards, etc., that somehow kids who may have all kinds of things competing going on in their lives are just going to flow and follow. But life doesn't work like that, in part because emotions and perceptions are very central to people's willingness to participate in things that are hard and that are difficult. The last set of points that I want to make have to do with are an outgrowth of this, and that is the importance of understanding the role of culture in learning and understanding the role of cultural socialization in preparing children for a world that is difficult. So the fact as Steve has noted in his text, that racism has been an integral part of the history of the United States. I'm going to be leading a tour of educational researchers to South Africa in the fall, and one of the things that I've said in that is that we have a joint history of apartheid. We don't want to use the word apartheid to talk about the United States, but the fact of the matter is we have a longer legal history of legal apartheid in the United States than not. So this experiment of integration and equal opportunity is a relatively new experiment, less than 50 years old in point of fact. And therefore, it seems to me that it is crucial, and one of the things that Lamar and my mother's generation understood was that education for black and brown kids had to prepare them for that world. And the assumption that somehow that if they get a college degree and they end up in the corporate setting or whatever, that life is going to open up and just everything will be hunky-dory is a mythology. Life is still going to be very difficult for these children, and part of the preparation, I think, has to be helping them to understand that system. I have 1 minute, and so I'm going to make a last few comments. Yeah, my final 2 comments are this. One is I am always, around this question of the influences of culture and development, very influenced by the work of Margaret Bill Spencer, who's now a colleague of Steve's at the University of Chicago. And one crucial point that she makes is that, to be human is to be at risk. And I make this point, even though it may seem obvious, that we are enmeshed in a set of beliefs about poverty and disadvantage. We don't pay attention, for example, to resilience in the face of poverty. That you can go to the neighborhood with the highest crime rate in Chicago and the worst school, and you will still find children who are thriving. And so part of what we need to do is to understand what are the sources of resilience in the face of that difficulty, and understand that learning that is a good for all of us, because all of us are at risk. Columbine is clear evidence that because you're white and middle class does not mean that you're not going to have children who are not facing stressors or are not facing risk. And I think that if we could begin in our public dialogue to sort of refocus on the human nature of the problem that we're dealing with, that it's not a specialized, it's like the statistics are very clear. I'm real clear on them. But our dialogue is like, the challenge, it's like there's a corner of the world for poor colored people, and they have special problems that are different than other human beings, and we have to find special kind of remedies for them, as opposed to saying there are sources of vulnerability that all human beings face, and those sources of vulnerability are going to be different, and we have to tailor, as parents, as socializers, as teachers, we have to tailor our response to the nature of those vulnerabilities, but those vulnerabilities are going to be there in any case. And then finally, I just want to close to say that while Steve talked about the model of the University of Chicago, there are many other models as well. We have been doing what we call culturally centered, African-centered in this case, because we're working with African-American students education for almost the last 40 years. And we have a huge number of adults out here who have come through this program who are doing absolutely superb things in the world. Our charter schools are now 10 years old. University of Chicago and Betty Shabazz started both in 1998. We always like to benchmark ourselves. We say they have a lot of money and we don't, but we do just as well as they do. And we have had joint challenges in the issue of how do we expand these models. But behind all of them is still a central science, if you will, to what it takes to build a community that can sustain positive socialization for children, basically helping them learn how to deal with the nature of risk that they face, and learning hard stuff is risky business.